Ladies and gentlemen, let us now listen to our opening keynote speaker, who flew in from Australia just for this conference, the Associate Director of Ernst & Young Global Center for Board Matters of Ernst & Young Sydney, Australia, Miss NADIA Woodhouse.
So rewind 10 years. It's 2012. I'm in my late 20s. I've worked my way up to a great place in my career. I'm a sustainability consultant. And on this particular July morning, I walked down Collins Street in Melbourne into my office. I pressed the button in the lift for the 27th floor, and as the doors close, I catch a glance of my reflection. I'm dressed in a power suit, all black, hard to imagine, I know. And as I exit the lift and turn to the left, I walk into the meeting room where my team are waiting for me. I look around at them, and there are 5 people. They are all men, and they're all older than me. And suffice to say, my imposter syndrome is going through the roof. And it's at this very moment that I notice a particular thing happening in my body. Tightening and constriction around my throat. And I realized it didn't just happen today, it's been happening for months. It's my body shutting down and telling me I'm not operating from an authentic place. I'm not operating from my heart. I'm trying too hard for my voice to be heard, trying to be authoritative, masculine, trying to be in control, in power all the time. Not my natural state. You see, the body keeps the score. How often have you heard the words, my mind is racing, or my spine tingled, or my heart is breaking? We have so many associations with the language of the body, but how often do we stop and really listen to what our body is trying to tell us? How often do we stop and listen to the fundamental physiological workings of our body, that which make our heart beat, our breath? So I wonder if you'd like to do a little simple experiment with me. Let's all just take 3 simple breaths together. Inhale, exhale. Inhale and exhale. Third one. Inhale and exhale. I wonder if for some of you, certainly for me sometimes, we're breathing up here from the chest, slow, like fast, shallow breaths. What would happen, I wonder, if we breathed down here from our belly, grounding and centering? Let's try that one more time. Maybe you'd like to shuffle forward a little in your seat. Maybe place your feet flat on the ground. Perhaps you'd like to straighten your spine by angling your heart over your hips and your head over your heart. Maybe the shoulders drop down a little bit. And let's breathe again, inhaling in through the nose, into the belly, exhaling out of the mouth. Inhaling in through the nose, feel the oxygen down the back of the throat, fill up the belly, and exhaling. Maybe the shoulders relax. Inhaling and exhaling. Maybe the muscles in the face relax a little. And I wonder what you notice. See, when we breathe shallow and fast, we're in fight or flight mode. When we're breathing from the belly, we're in rest and digest. We're activating the parasympathetic nervous system. We're slowing down our heart rate. We're lowering our stress levels. We're a little less anxious. We're maybe a little more centered, calm, productive, perhaps. And you see, we move from fight or flight to rest and digest. And we need both these states to thrive and operate, but we do need to be in rest and digest a little bit more often. Why? Because 82% of the business leaders that we survey say market disruptions are becoming more frequent and more impactful. Are we going to be in fight or flight mode, or are we going to be tuning into the heart space, grounded, centered, less panicked, in the face of these ongoing disruptions? See, I wish I was listening to my heart 10 years ago. So look, in the next 10 minutes, I'm going to give you 3 reasons why we need to bring the heart back into business. Number 1, When I think about the language of the heart, I think about emotion. But haven't we been always been told to leave our emotions at the door, right? Separate your feelings from business, they've got no place here. Well, in some recent research that we did with the University of Oxford Said Business School, we found that as a leader of a successful transformation, you are more likely to have embraced the emotional journey of your people and of yourself as you go through that disruption. We need to make space and be conversant about our self-doubts, our anxieties, and our fears ahead. As Cliff and Babes mentioned, there is a lot of disruption coming our way. The author Brené Brown talks a lot about vulnerability, right, and the power to lead. We need to be able to create the psychological safety for our people to feel that they can speak up without judgment. The leaders that were successful were more likely to also listen to ideas from their people. People, they make what makes our business tick, right, and go around. We need to understand the motivations and mindsets of our people, particularly the next gen. I loved that the 12 principles is fantastic. Our next generation, particularly Gen Z, are poised to become the leaders of our businesses. They make up 30% of our population, largest generational cohort in history. So what makes their minds tick and what makes their hearts beat? Number one, I think this goes without saying, fair pay, salary, and healthcare. We need to be well enough and well paid enough to look after our extended families. Number two, we know flexibility and mobility, that's huge. For my generation, the millennials, we wanted career progression. These guys, they want to be able to co-create the experience they have at work. They're yearning for adventure, especially after the generation-defining events of the pandemic. Gen Z, they want to be able to decide whether they work from the office or they work online. Speaking of online, they really care about online communities. Even they value them as much as they value meeting in the physical space. Right? They value real and honest conversations with real and honest people, not celebrities that I used to idolize. It's real influencers on democratized platforms, social media platforms. They want to have authentic conversations. And Gen Z really want to work for and buy from. They want to buy from organizations that align with their values. They want to consume better, not more. They want to, well, they hope that their savings and investments, they don't degrade the planet directly. I think maybe that's the hope for all of us. I mean, we want to ensure, we do want to ensure that the brands that we buy from are sustainable and they have longevity, because we want our favorite brands to be around for the long term. As one chief risk officer and board member, who's actually here today, told me recently, sustainability needs to be the cornerstone of every business's risk register, because without a livable planet, you have no business. And finally, Gen Z, they really want to work for an organisation that aligns with their value system. They value good culture, diversity. In this changing era and social context of mental health becoming less of a taboo, sexual expression becoming less of a taboo at work, thankfully, Gen Z want us to lead with empathy, and they want us to lead with heart. And so what is the beating heart of business? It's purpose. And I'm not talking about the general purpose around maximising ownership returns. That is foundational and important, yes. But I'm talking about a purpose that is more meaningful, that creates a social or environmental positive impact that's embedded and connected into your strategy. Because I think we can start to smell, greenwashing and purpose washing from a mile away. We're a bit more savvy than that these days. We want to ensure, or we would love to look up to those organisations that have purpose interconnected with their strategy, that have the right incentives for management, that can be measured and are transparent. You're probably wondering, do these organisations even exist? Yes, absolutely. You'll probably hear from quite a few of them today, and I bet there are so many more in the crowds. There's even a certification for these types of businesses that balance purpose and profit. They're called B corporations. I wonder if any of you have heard of them. There are over 6,000 of them globally. There's actually a couple that are headquartered here in the Phils and 54 that have operations, so you'll find them, you'll recognise their brands. Larry Fink, BlackRock's CEO, he talks at length about stakeholder capitalism, so that sustainability, including diversity, is now square on the board's agenda. As one board member, actually the board member for Goldman Sachs recently was quoted in an interview saying, it's going to be really weird if you have an organisation that is not gender diverse or even cognitively diverse, because we have so many interconnected and complex, wicked problems that we need a representation of all stakeholders in society to be able to solve these problems, right? Now, I've been with EY for a long time. You know that as SGV here in the market. And long enough to remember when our old purpose was, wait for it, quality in everything we do, which was very apt at that time, but no longer resonates, right, with this generation. And I saw us transform our purpose in the last couple of years. And what's more important than that transformation is that we have a strategy and a roadmap to achieve that purpose, which is building a better working world. And even more important than that, we've invested in transformational leadership training for all 300,000 of our employees to help them to understand what is their personal purpose, what drives them, and how does it link to EY's strategy. It doesn't really matter, you see, if it's a strong link or a direct link or a tenuous link. What matters is that, and what I find the most courageous leaders do, is actually they have conversations about their personal purpose. They're unafraid and they're curious to uncover the purpose of their team and all the people around them. They move from a conversation around tactics to a compelling vision of the future that everyone can get behind. They're really they're able to embrace the emotions, all emotions, positive or negative, of their people, especially in the face of disruptive change. And they are unafraid to be vulnerable in the face of uncertainty. Because let's face it, there is a lot of uncertainty. We're in a climate emergency. Amnesty International says that here in the Philippines, you are most at risk from the impacts of climate change while having done very little to cause it. We're widening social inequity. We have a very passionate, tech-enabled, but very anxious Generation Z that we need to nurture and look after. But there's hope. As I mentioned, if you can embrace that emotional journey, make space for different opinions, listen to dissenters, we're able to be a little bit more resilient. If we can create humans, put humans at the center of our business transformations, we are 2.5 times more likely to succeed. So that's pretty big. So I've just given you 3 reasons why we need to bring more heart back into business. Right, number 1, let's get fluent in the conversation of the heart, the emotions. If we do that, we're more likely to succeed in disruptive times. Number 2, let's understand what motivates our people. When we do that, we're more likely to create businesses that they want to come and work for and that they'll stay working for. And number 3, let's create a compelling purpose that is aligned to these times and to the future, so that we can create organizations that people want to buy from and work for and invest in. So I know that having that technical nous and that grounding in strategy is really, really important for our businesses to survive and thrive. We need technical know-how, we need to have a grounding in risk and innovation and strategy. I get that. I call that the head of business. We have a heart and a soul too. Yeah. So how do we bring more heart and soul back into business? I'll give you 3 ways. Number 1, check into your own heart. Understand how your heart is feeling and what well-being looks like and feels like for you. When you're a bit more calm and centered, remember, you know what they say, put your oxygen mask on first, right? Remember to breathe. Number 2, once you're calm and centered and you have that emotional literacy around the heart, perhaps be curious about the conversations about how others' hearts are feeling. Maybe with people, friends, old and new that you meet today, maybe with your team members on Monday. And number 3, let's do a heart health check into our own businesses, the purpose of our own organization, right? Can we as a leadership team authentically commit to some goals around improving equity or minimizing harm so that we can create inclusive businesses that are going to leave a lasting legacy? So imagine this. Imagine if you had a diverse workforce that was fully committed to doing business responsibly so that that company would be around for the next 100 years. See, I've always been very concerned and obsessed with legacy. That's why I work with boards. And no more so now that my son has just turned 1. I think I'm really grappling with this question. The board members I talk to are grappling with this question. Maybe you as parents or aunts and uncles here also thinking about this. See, my son, he says one word right now. That word is mum. And I want to be ready for the moment, and I think we all do, for that moment when he says, Mum or Dad, what did you do to help? So my challenge for you for the rest of this afternoon, approach it with an open heart. Have those glorious conversations about what gives you meaning and purpose and what drives you and what makes your heart beat. I would love to know. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Woodhouse. May we request Ms. Woodhouse to please stay on stage. And ladies and gentlemen, at this point, please welcome the moderator for this session, the head of investment banking for the Philippines of CLSA Exchange Capital Inc., and a member of the MAP NextGen Committee, Professor Paolo Antonio Paolo L. AZURIN.
Thank you, man. It was a wonderful talk, and something is very close to the heart of the, not just the MAP NextGen Committee, but the NextGen leaders in general. We have mics in the middle of the area. No? So if there are any questions from the audience, feel free to approach any of the mics, and we'll be happy to take them. But to start, Nadia, as I mentioned, we do talk a lot about this topic of bringing heart or authenticity, and it's something we bring into the classroom as well, no? Where we talk about these topics quite extensively. In your role as someone that works with boards, what trends are you seeing in the boardroom when it comes to bringing more heart into business?
Yeah, thanks for that question, and thank you very much to everybody here in the organizing committee for having me. It's a real honor. When I think about the research that we've done with the boardroom, and this is sort of global boards, we have a couple of, I guess, themes coming out. Certainly the one around legacy that I touched on. One is around, I guess, curiosity. I see a lot of board members asking or thinking about the skill sets that they need to steward their organizations into the future. And a lot of board members, I think, are grappling with a huge load of information that they have to deal with, huge liabilities rising, board packs going through the roof, the fact that they're only working, meeting once every quarter, it's sort of just not enough. And there's, we're only one human and only 24 hours in the day. So a lot of the feelings that I get coming back from the boardroom is, how can I, be bringing more skill sets into the board, not necessarily creating a new committee here and there. I mean, sometimes that's quite necessary, but how do I bring experts? So this kind of curiosity and open-heartedness that I see with the boardroom, I think is an interesting trend. On the flip side of that, there's obviously, piling up risk concerns, directors and officers, liabilities, those sorts of things. So they really do have to manage that. The other trend, I guess, in terms of heart and open-heartedness is that willingness to increase diversity. I mentioned gender diversity, I mentioned cognitive diversity. it is really important to bring that in. And I didn't finish the Goldman Sachs quote, but he said, this is business, this is good business. It's not just woke, right? I think a lot of board members are realizing that. So yeah, those would be the two things: curiosity, diversity, when it comes to this sort of openness of the heart, I would say.
It's good you mentioned good business, doing good business. It's funny, literally just before Nadia came up on stage, I had someone approach me a while ago. Apart from being an investment banker, a money-grabbing investment banker, I also teach. No? So one of my students from 2001 approached me, Jao, special mention. What I was teaching in 2001 on econ is very different from what I'm teaching today. In business school, where we talk about good business. In your experience, what have you seen in terms of good business and tangible examples of business doing well by doing good?
Business doing well by doing good, I love that. There are quite a few examples, and I think they're along the spectrum of big business and small business and old business and new business, right? Like, it's not just one type of organization. There are organizations like social enterprises which have good at the heart, like, baked into them, and they are like the shining stars. But there are also really old organizations that have transformed. You look at Unilever as like an obvious example, right? Paul Polman did away with quarterly earnings so that they could attract more patient capital rather than people that wanted quarterly results all the time. And he kind of turned the organization around. I mentioned B corporations. These are organizations that are certified ethical businesses, and they have impact locked into their business models. They also put a commitment to stakeholders within their governing documents and their constitution, which is really an interesting topic, right, depending on where you're legislated and what the precedents are in the law around stakeholder stack and shareholder primacy. If I am selfish and talk about EY or STV, we also just posted our kind of record-breaking profit, right? And I put a lot of that down to that transformative leadership training, that deep investment in our people, the fact that we have that heart in the middle of everything that we do. We're not perfect, but I think there's certainly a correlation there. And I guess a couple of other examples, when I look at, say, the pandemic, you look at organizations that maybe decided to make a loss in the short term for the pursuit of a greater outcome, like Medtronic, who made its IP available for the ventilators during COVID. I look at companies like Patagonia, the apparel company. They make their IP available for their kind of renewable materials for their wetsuits so that anyone can copy that. Like, that's not really that competitive of them, but overall, they have huge brand loyalty. You see these people, they're just married to Patagonia head to toe in that stuff. For that type of community, you have this huge brand loyalty. And there are local examples. I know that there's organizations, you're probably going to hear from them later today, creating affordable housing or helping small business owners to grow and succeed through the use of platforms and technology and last mile. We need to also look at our local examples to be inspired by that.
And a lot of this has to do. The problems are all encompassing, but focusing on one problem in particular that businesses try to address or try to solve through responsibilities, climate change.
Yeah.
What's one thing organizations can do right now in order to act on climate change?
Yeah, I think. Climate is so in front of us. Like, COP27 is happening. There are commitments being made by countries. We're focusing on the global south. I think that's really important. I think for organizations trying to understand what their impact positively can be on the climate, you need to look at your material issues first, like in your strategy. What can I do? What is my business doing right now? And how can I impact that? Because everyone can go and, we do offsets, we put some solar panels on, that's all great. But actually, how can my business be more sustainable in terms of the emissions that it's linking to? I think I'm going to answer your question. Two things that businesses can do. I think the board can link exec pay to carbon emissions. So BHP has done this, Exxon, Royal Dutch Shell. So that's if they're going to be really ambitious. And you can set a science-based target. So this science-based target looks at your impact and makes sure that you create a target in your strategy for a reduction in your emissions that's going to lead us to a 1.5 degree world. So there's two things. They're not easy, by the way. They're not simple things, but they're really strategic things that are necessary.
Right. Yeah, in relation to that, we had this discussion previously. So, we talk about companies and large organizations having a mindset to impact climate change positively. But we also had this side discussion where it has to be there's the big corporation side. There also has to be the demand side, right? Where consumers have to demand these sorts of things. And I gave you the example in the Philippines, you can have organizations concerned about packaging and recycling and sustainability, but you have a problem where people still buy sachets because it's very price. We're very price sensitive in this type of economy. So how do you, in your experience or what you've seen, what sort of progress has been made in terms of creating the demand for sustainability from the consumer side?
Yeah, and I do have to acknowledge that I come from a position of privilege, right? We have Australia is doing okay in terms of its, well, not that great in terms of its climate commitments, but we have a privileged position. So I do understand that when your cost of living and your expenses are quite high compared to the amount of money that you bring in, you might not be able to afford the most sustainable option. I do understand that. And right now, sustainable things are more expensive. So that's not helpful. It's going to take a lot of partnership, I believe. It's going to take a lot of collaboration. We can't just keep, I guess, as sustainability professionals or management, we can't just keep on this race to the bottom of disclosure and ESG and kind of like ticking the box and those sorts of things. We need to collaborate to kind of figure out what are the best solutions. The best ideas come out of partnership and of cross-sector partnership and as well as government intervention. So that's a very, that's the utopia, right? When everybody's working together. And I do realize that's not going to happen all the time, right? So in Australia, for example, we've got feed-in tariffs for solar. So people were encouraged, this is a long time ago, people are encouraged to put solar panels on their roof and we would pay for the electricity that they would feed back to the grid. That was great. That was severely funded by the government, it had to be. So it's those sorts of pushes that create a financial incentive for the consumer to act. It's going to be hard unless we kind of harness that energy of the next generation to demand that kind of like that push-pull of sustainable products. But that is a luxurious position. I do recognize that.
Right. Just want to ask if there are any questions from the audience. Oh, Babes, President Babes, yes.
Yeah, maybe you can use that.
You can use this mic.
We'll improvise.
Yeah, improvise.
Well, thank you so much, Nadia, for focusing on bringing the heart to the organization. My question is, what method or technique can you suggest to baby boomers like us or to better understand the Gen Z? Now, I practice reverse mentoring, just reaching out to the young in the organization just to find out to the extent of what kind of music, as against the Beatles that we knew and the BTS or Blackpink that they love, those things, what kind of other techniques would you suggest to people like us in the organization to better relate and be able to connect better to the younger generations?
Thank you for that conversation. I do love the Beatles, I have to say. I'm more on the older side.
How about BTS, though?
Yeah, pretty cool too, yeah. I know they're huge here. it's a really interesting challenge that we have to connect, especially when a lot of Gen Z don't want to connect face to face. You probably have had the experience of maybe trying to, to mentor a Gen Z and they won't pick up the phone, to call. That's certainly in Australia, allergic to speaking, right? And so we need to invest in technology that enables them to feel really native and comfortable in voicing their opinions. So one of our findings at the Humans at Centre research that we did was that we need to have like a realistic or a human-centered approach to technology and embracing opinions. When I remember, it was a couple of years ago when we said, we did an online platform, Ask the CEO Anything, and you could submit anonymous questions, right? And then he would go on a webcast and answer, not all of them. I'm sure there was a filter, but he would go and answer those. And I think that stakeholder connection and communication and that consistent ability to recognize that people want to be heard and to take the time to really consider your answer, I think that's very valuable. And I think a lot of Gen Z also, they want to be recognized in that online sphere, like, we've had this question, that sort of thing. I think that helps a lot, certainly helps me. And it's a way that they can still be anonymous, I suppose, in those conversations. I guess that's one thing I would suggest.
Wonderful. Well, that's a good segue, because we started out with a very macro, big business, board level type of discussion. And Babes brought it to a big part of what you were already saying, that a lot of this has to do with people. So moving down into that level, you talk a lot about heart and authenticity, which actually already has entered the discussion in the academe for one, where I'm partly involved in. What sort of shift have you seen in terms of boards and senior leaders, trying to make steps to be more authentic towards their staff?
Yeah, it's I go back to this story of when I had an issue at work, and I spoke to some female leaders about it in the UK, and this is long time ago, pre these days. And I remember the response that I got from them was sort of like a really, you're over there, I'm over here, and I'm not going to breach that boundary with you. Like, I'm going to give you that canned response. And it was almost, I felt like they were not in their body, and they were probably trying to be more masculine rather than embracing their femininity. Everybody has, there's yin and yang, right? We all have a bit of masculine, we all have a bit of feminine. And what I had seen, I guess, is that we had lived up till now in a society that had these traits, like be authoritative, like be loud, command the room, rather than be nurturing or be collaborative. And I do see a rise in sort of feminine leadership coming up, and that's for you and I, right? Like, that's for everybody, is to be more gentle. And we need role models like that, I think. So I guess, I think it's just stepping into like who you really are, and that's not like a really solid answer, is it? It's very vague, but it's like,
that's exactly what it is, right?
Yeah, it's soft and it's messy and it's confusing. It's no easy answer. I mean, what do you see? What do you think?
Yeah, well, actually, the whole point of authentic leadership, right, as you mentioned, is, you can't try to lead like someone else, and if you'll fail, because that's not who you are, right? In fact, funny that you mentioned Medtronic, because I had Bill George as a teacher, the person who wrote about authentic leadership and True North, and one of the things he talks about is self-awareness and basically understanding yourself so you can project it properly outside. So it turns out that's kind of the preferred or the recommended leadership style nowadays, moving forward for Gen Z, who crave authenticity.
Right.
Who crave authenticity. Now this one, I'll just throw you a little bit of a curveball here, since it's the last question. So you talked a lot about Jen said craving authenticity, and the need to interact with their role models, and primarily doing that through social media, because it's a personal interaction. But yeah, one thing that's kind of bothered me as well is you have the social media platform where you interact with, but at the same time you also hear stories about social media not being that authentic. Right, because it's very contrived sometimes.
Yeah.
Say for example, what's this guy's name? Brendan Wallach, the guy crying CEO, right? Fired staff and then posted on LinkedIn that he's so sad, and it's just obviously very self-serving and contrived. So how do you manage authenticity in an environment like that?
I think it's almost impossible to really manage that. I don't know how we are supposed to regulate authenticity. I don't know how we can call people out for being authentic. It's such a tough question, especially when you've got cyberbullying, when you've got so many walls that we build around us and that people build up for us, that we can't then we have to project. We have to put filters on, or we have to project. Absolutely, that's an issue. But I don't think it's going away. I don't think like Gen Z is just going to walk away from social media or any of those platforms. I do think there needs to be some sort of regulation, though, around, I guess, protecting our vulnerable from some of the issues that we see today. So that's got to be global as well, and you see sort of whistleblowers coming out around Facebook and their sort of policies. I think we need to look after the mental health of our people, because when you turn off your computer or you put down your phone, there you are. Like it's just us, and we need to look after each other. So I think we all have a personal responsibility to just check in with each other. I guess I'll end on that sort of caring note, because the computer's not going to do it.
Absolutely. Wonderful. Well, that's all the time we have for this session. Wish we had more time.
Yeah.
So such an interesting topic. So thank you very much, Nadia. It was a privilege having you here, and thank you on behalf of the MAP NextGen committee.
Thank you for having me. Thanks, Paolo.
A round of applause, please, for Ms. Woodhouse and Professor AZURIN.